Hi guys! When we left off reading Ghost in the Machine, which is the second Skeleton Creek book, we had just watched a video where Sarah had shared that she found a silhouette of Joe Bush in the video from the night that they were at the dredge, where he had been watching them before they got locked in the secret room. And she had also said that she was going to spend the day walking up and down Main Street and filming everything she could find there to look for any of the symbols of the crossbones or the alchemist symbol for gold to see if they could start figuring out more mysteries around what's going on with the dredge. Sunday, September 19th, 11 a.m. I couldn't go back to sleep after watching Sarah's newest video, and I was hungry besides. The breakfast smell working its way up the stairs and under my door is tough to ignore, especially on Sunday morning when we actually get a weekly paper and Mom doesn't give me a hard time about drinking coffee. Any other morning, she's on my case, but Sunday is a free pass, for reasons I don't entirely understand. Have you ever looked across the table past a plate of scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast and wondered if you could trust your own parents? I just did. "Where's Henry?" I said, and then I shoved most of a piece of toast in my mouth and washed it down with coffee. Henry is my dad's best friend, who visits from New York for a couple of weeks every year. He's got a complicated past when it comes to the dredge. "Fishing," Dad said. He was staring at the paper, which was on the table next to his plate. He glanced up at me, then back at the editorial page. "You're going to school next week," he went on. "I know." "That's not a license to talk with Sarah Fincher. You know that, right?" I didn't answer him. Inside I was seething, but there was no point saying anything. I was already talking with Sarah practically every day without either of my parents knowing about it. Getting their permission had found its way to the bottom of my priority list. Mom piped in, "He knows, Paul. Just read your paper and let the boy eat in peace." All right, but we agreed. School next week, no excuses, and no Sarah Fincher. They blamed Sarah for my accident. They said she was trouble. They were totally wrong about the first part. The second part remained to be seen. I finished my breakfast and came back to my room. I could tell Dad wanted to insist I go outside, but Mom was pretty mad about how he was badgering me, so he left me alone. I think I've got a few hours of peace and quiet up here, at least until Henry gets back. After that, all bets are off. He'll want to play cards or talk. What's my dad hiding? His name is on a slab in the dredge that ties him to a whole bunch of other names. He's part of a secret society. He's got the alchemy symbol for gold tattooed on his shoulder and that alchemist diagram in his drawer. It has to add up to something. But what? I'll start with the names from the secret room. That's my best clue. I'll work my way down the list and figure out who these people are. Maybe some of them are still alive. Like the librarian. Like my father. Sunday, September 19th, 2 p.m. Other than my mom stopping by an hour ago with lunch, I've had 3 hours of uninterrupted research time on my laptop. I keep it very quiet in my room, no music or anything like that, so I could hear the ting of a butter knife on the edge of a glass mayonnaise jar as she made my sandwich. This was my signal to erase everything I was working on. I've gotten to where I can do this and re-enable the software my parents think is keeping tabs on me in less than 30 seconds. Unless they're watching with a camera, there's no way they're keeping track of what I'm doing up here. I almost spilled the beans to my mom when she was in here. It's like I want to trust her, but she's married to my dad and he's tangled up in this secret stuff. She'd tell him. I know she would. And she was just as mad at me after the accident. Maybe madder. After Mom set the Coke and the sandwich on my desk, she stared out the window. "You coming down anytime soon?" I shrugged and popped the top on the Coke can. "Is Henry back yet?" I asked. My mom shook her head. "Your dad went after him. Fishing must be good." I hesitated a second, then said, "Have you ever been in the old dredge, Mom?" She looked at me like I was slipping through her fingers and falling down a steep hill. You know the look, the one where your mom thinks you're in trouble, but can't help you. "I haven't been out to the dredge in years. Why do you ask?" I could see she was nervous, like I was dancing around the edge of something she was afraid to hear, so I totally backed off. "No reason. It's been out there a long time. I figured you'd been inside." She looked relieved, which made me glad I hadn't told her I was seeing ghosts, hanging out with Sarah, and wandering around the dredge in the middle of the night getting trapped in secret rooms. My mom wanted a normal son, who was in school and didn't get into strange kinds of trouble all the time. I can't really say that I blame her. "Eat your sandwich," she said, and then we talked about something else. It'll make more sense if I explain it later, but we did talk some more. Then she left and I was all alone. That was the only interruption I had in a very successful 3 hours online as detective work goes. Here is what I did. First, I made a list of all the names that were on the slab in the secret room. I added Daryl Bonner's name to the list because I don't trust him at all. Neither does Sarah. The names became, I guess, my suspect list. Suspects of what crime? I don't know yet, but I'm closer to finding some answers now than I was last night. This was the list I began with, in the order I wanted to investigate them. Joseph Bush, Francis Palmer, Paul McCrae, Gladys Morgan, The Apostle, Dr. Watts, Jordan Hook, Wilson Boyle, Hector Newton, Daryl Bonner. First things first, scratch Joseph Bush from the list. That guy is already dead. I went back to my old journal and read my entry from September 13th. I've torn it out and moved it here as evidence. The greatest discovery, or the worst, depending on how you look at it, that Sarah and I made involved the untimely death of a workman on the dredge. There was only one mention of the incident in the newspaper, and nothing anywhere else. Old Joe Bush is what they called him, so I can only conclude he was not a young man. Old Joe Bush had let his pant leg get caught in the gears, and the machinery of the dredge had pulled him through, crushing his leg bone into gravel. Then the dredge spit him out into the grimy water. His leg was demolished, and under the deafening sound in the dark night, no one heard him scream. Old Joe Bush never emerged from the black pond below. Whenever I see or hear that name, my leg starts to ache, and I think of all the times I've seen and heard what remains of Old Joe Bush. I've heard him with my own ears dragging that crushed leg across the old floor of the dredge. I've seen footage of him. Am I really saying this? Seen him through the broken window and leaning down into a secret room and moving across a camera that's been dropped. I've felt him push me over a rail high enough off the ground to kill me. The important thing right now is that Joseph Bush is off the list, and he's not the only worker who died on the dredge. I searched and searched for Francis Palmer and didn't have any luck at all until I remembered all those minutes and reports from the New York Gold and Silver Company. Those were big files, and there were lots of them. Plus, I had gone in and started highlighting different areas of interest. I couldn't keep those files on my computer, so I transferred them to a flash drive and taped it under one of the drawers of my desk. And you know what? It's a good thing I did that, because when I went looking for those files online a couple of hours ago, a big chunk of them were gone. Someone, somewhere, was able to classify those old files, or knew someone was looking at them. Maybe they tracked my IP address to Skeleton Creek and didn't like someone snooping around. It's not a good idea that things from the past are being hidden away. People only hide reports if they think someone will find something bad in them, which is exactly what I found. I pulled up the files from that flash drive and ran a program I have that will sift through multiple documents for keywords all at one time. I put in the keywords Francis Palmer. I got a return on a document dated within months of the death of Joseph Bush. When I highlighted the entry from a board of directors meeting, I realized the death of Francis Palmer took place only 27 days after the death of Joseph Bush. Sorry guys, it's really hard to line that up on the camera. NYGSPM Minutes, paragraph 9, page 25. The number 42 asset holding in Skeleton Creek, Oregon, was the location of a fatal accident on 8/12/63. The second fatality in less than a month has led to an internal safety and structural investigation of assets number 31 through number 47. The victim, Francis Palmer, was a long-term night shift control room operator. He was found dead in the water below asset number 42. An apparent accidental drowning. Legal department advises adding safety precautions to asset number 42 in the form of railings and window bars. Approved. Cost analysis for modifications to asset number 42 scheduled for September 15th. Insurance claims pending with Palmer family. Scratch Francis Palmer off the list. Dead. He and Joe Bush were both in the Crossbones, and both of them died on the dredge within a month of each other. I had a brief moment of concern as my dad's face flashed before my eyes. 20% of the people on the list had already been killed off, and I hadn't even been investigating for an hour. The next two people on the list were Dad and Gladys Morgan, the librarian. I at least know these two are still alive. For some reason, I just couldn't go searching around online for my dad. It's too weird. Who knew what kind of junk I might dig up about Paul McRae? He was involved. He was alive. He was secretive like everyone else in town. He'd lived here his whole life. He had a diagram with symbols and strange statements on it. He had a secret tattoo, and he was living in the same house as me. So I moved on to Gladys Morgan, expecting to find out she was a dreary old windbag with a long, eventless life full of long, eventless days, weeks, and months. Boy, was I wrong. The first thing I found, Gladys Morgan hasn't always stayed in Skeleton Creek, contrary to what she tells everyone. She also spent some time in New York City, if you can believe that. How do I know Gladys Morgan was in New York City? Because the New York Times is archived online, and Gladys Morgan once made the news. That's right, our Gladys Morgan, in the New York Times. And here's the most interesting part. She was in the news right after the accident on the dredge occurred. Here's a small part of the article I found. Protest erupts over environmental allegations. New York Gold and Silver board members arrived on Park Avenue this morning and found more than 50 protesters from all across America. The company, which operates dozens of gold dredges in remote parts of Alaska, Oregon, and Montana, has come under fire in recent months for what many are calling a disregard for environmental concerns in small towns across the West. One of those in attendance, Gladys Morgan, came all the way from rural Oregon to join in the protest. They've got some explaining to do, simple as that, Morgan said. She, like many of those in attendance, lives in a small town where a New York gold and silver dredge grinds along the outskirts of town 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They haven't kept up their end of the bargain. I'm here to tell them they're gonna, whether they like it or not. Jim Pearson, a lumber mill worker from Billings, Montana, who drove the entire 3,000-mile journey with his dog Skipper, had similar complaints. What was she doing there? I get that she was angry, but going all the way to New York to complain with a bunch of other small-town folks? I think there was more to it than that. What if she was there as a member of the Crossbones? 2 of them were dead in the span of a month, or maybe the whole thing was a cover, especially her participation in this rally, and she worked for New York Gold and Silver all along. She could have killed them both. It's possible. She sure has the temper for it. In detective terms, I think the evidence clearly points to Gladys Morgan as a person of interest. The next name on my list, the Apostle, led nowhere. I couldn't find anything online that made any sense or connected anyone with that title to Skeleton Creek or the dredge. The only thing I can think of now is to check with one of the old churches in town. Maybe they know something. With a name like the Apostle, a house of worship seems like the most obvious place to look.